Welcome to a clinical research spotlight here at the Movement Guild. My name is Adam Wolf. I like this paper. It matters to me clinically, especially for those people that we're working with that have pain, chronic pain. Understanding what's happening in the nervous system, I've found helpful. And so as a clinician, understanding that a little bit, what's being encoded in the body, what's becoming conscious, what gives that experience meaning, and is nociception related and pain related? They're related, but they're not the same thing, right? Nociception, you have nociceptors. Nociceptors are found in your periphery. Nociception is not a bad thing in itself. Nociception happens when we're sleeping or when we're in a coma. And so we continually receive nociceptive information, and sometimes it's an issue and sometimes it's not. And when it becomes conscious, it becomes salience. That salience network is what plays a role in that. And so this paper for me matters. And it's an important paper because it helps to conceptualize that idea that pain maybe is in the brain, that there's a hierarchy of pain processing, as it really helps, that contribute to pain. Pain is not just one part of the brain. And it's an interactive network that's not necessarily linear. We could think of these ideas of first order processing, second order processing, and third order processing. So the first order is maybe in our subconscious. The second order becomes part of our conscious experience. Your salience network is almost the alarm system of your body, letting you know if we need to move away from that fire, or if we're okay and it's warm and feels good in the camp. The third order processing assigns meaning to what's happening, meaning the memory around what happened. The meaning of the memory of what happened also plays a part in this third order. It gets into the memory centers and the emotional centers of the brain. System is weighing. This gets into sensory weighting and how much we're relying in our nervous system on the information we're getting from our sensory systems. There's three different questions we should be asking. First is what's happening in the body. That's what's happening in that encoding center, that first order. We can think of the second order experiences. Am I consciously feeling this? And the third order is our meaning and memory, is what do I remember? What does this mean to me in the moment? And then after the moment happened, what does this mean to me? And so for me, my perception is what's happening in the body. These areas that are happening in the encoding areas, the encoding happens in these posterior insula and the medial parietal operculum, and also the mid-cingulate cortex. These are the deeper part of the brains that help have some emotional centers of the brain. You could think of it as the limbic system is what you'll maybe hear it called. They get direct spinal thalamic input, right? They have somatic origin. There's spatial localization is what this helps with, and includes the intensity of the noxious input. That's one of the information pieces that is being sent into the brain from those receptors, from the encoding receptors. This often occurs, again, before conscious awareness. Encoding does not equal awareness. That's an important point to remember right there. The second piece is the conscious experience. And am I feeling this consciously right now? We've got the prefrontal cortex. We've got the posterior parietal cortex. No direct spinal thalamic inputs. That's important. So it's getting its information from the other centers in the brain, right? So if you stimulate these areas, you're not going to necessarily get pain patterns in the body. Lesions don't produce analgesia, right? We need to recognize, again, it's a network of the brain. A lot of parts contribute to what's happening based on the context of what's happening. That's an important point for me as I think about it. Conscious pain depends on salience, attention, salience, and network coupling, right? So that idea about salience is the alarm system, bringing it into our awareness, and then helping to couple the different networks of the brain, including the default mode network, including the descending modulation pain network, that sometimes get altered when we're having chronic pain. Have chronic pain, interestingly, other papers, people that have chronic pain and our anxiety around their chronic pain, they're like hypervigilant, which becomes interesting as we're working with these people. Same interventions we can use, we might use differently based on which type of person we're working with. That high anxiety person, we might treat a little differently than somebody that has chronic pain that doesn't have high anxiety. We need to understand that sensory activity is not alone enough. We need to get the consciousness, we need to get motor activity. We need to create that idea about input to output. Pain is an output, let's change the input. Understanding these concepts, in my opinion, allows us to be a little more specific in the input changes we're trying to make. And understanding that nociceptive encoding can exist with a conscious experience or without the conscious experience. So understand this helps me. Again, we're going to touch on the salience network, which I found really interesting. It's that, again, we keep seeing these parts of the limbic system, the anterior insula and the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. These are regions of the limbic system. And what is helping us to understand is what's happening right now. Do we need to understand, does this require our attention, or can we pass it off? We want to just pass it off. We don't want to get stuck in the salience network. We can also think about the salience network as helping us network switch from that default mode network, which is a new term here, versus the executive function network. You could think of executive mode network, different ways to describe that. But essentially, you could think of it, your internal reference system is your default mode network. What's happening in my body? What does this mean to me? Memory, meaning of memory, those type of things. That self-referential is the default mode network versus the executive function network, which is more outside of your body. So salience network, just thinking about it a little bit differently, and that which leads us into number 3, the meaning and memory of our pain. What does this pain mean, and how will I remember it? That's sort of what this is idea. The part of the brain, if we look at it, this is the higher part of the brain. It gets into cognition a lot. So these parts of the brain is where it encodes memory of what's happening. And in chronic pain, again, these pieces start to shift. That gets into other papers that I'm not going to touch on right now, but these systems change subjective pain, and these can change what we're feeling at that first level pain. And they operate through our meaning of what happened, our belief systems about why it's happening to me, or in general belief systems. And then also our expectations around movement or pain or not having pain, or whatever that expectation might be. So when we think about it that way, it's changing our experience because we're reappraising in the third processing idea, what's happened, our memory of what happened. And so understanding that we can change it through placebo. So when we see placebo, that's where we're working, is the third order processing. Meditation, I don't love that word, but mindfulness is another way to say it. Belief and context also can help. So it changes the meaning, but not the original sensory signal. And so the third order processing, it shapes how we're remembering pain, and it helps us to regulate our pain processing when we're getting that painful signal in, or that nociceptive signal that we're assigning intense meaning to. We can then use our cognition to perhaps change what we're thinking about it. And so that's the idea there. If the pain we remember is constructed, not simply implied. And so memory and future regulation, we could think of as a third order. We need to understand that these interrelate, right? The nociceptive system is interrelated to our perception and attention, which is interrelated to our reappraisal and our emotion, and they can feed into each other. It's not an isolated model. And we need to appreciate that there's these 3 levels that we can contextually use our language when we're working with people in chronic pain. What it means for me clinically is that nociception doesn't equal pain. Imaging does not objectively measure a person's pain. We need to understand the scary, anxiety-provoking words on MRIs is what I say a lot, okay? Attention, salience, expectation, and memory are part of the mechanism, not the issue, right? For the clinician, the question becomes, what is the nervous system encoding and prioritizing? Nociception is information. So hopefully this sheds some light. Hopefully, if you have any questions, hit me up. Looking forward to some conversation.